It's the place you'd expect to be the safest. But in the waiting room of one of the country's busiest A&Es, it was anything but for Robert Fray. The grandfather of 3, suffering from sepsis and later a stroke, was left unattended for 16 hours. 4 years after his death, his daughter has decided to speak out for the first time.
Someone's got to fight for him. Someone's got to do something for him for what they've done to him. Because he didn't deserve it.
It was on the 4th of April 2022 that Robert Fray started developing signs of sepsis while attending a dialysis centre. It took 6 hours for an ambulance to arrive, by which time he'd been sent home.
He was being sick, and then confusion set in, and he was just like staring into space. I was like, "Dad, are you okay? Are you going to be okay?" He was like, wouldn't talk. Got him to the ambulance, and he just looked at me, and he was trying to say, "I love you," but he couldn't.
Claire, to her deep distress, was unable to join her dad at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham because of COVID restrictions. She spent the night calling for updates, each time assured he was being looked after. Then, when a family member visited the A&E at 4 p.m. the next day, they were told Robert had left the department.
They took him off the system at 4 o'clock in the morning because they called him and there was no reply. We raced back to the hospital. I'm activating Find My iPhone, because he had the iPhone, and it's saying that he's still at the hospital. But they said he got up and walked out.
But Robert was still there, sat in A&E. He was unconscious, having had a stroke, and no one had checked on him for 16 hours.
And they found him in the waiting room, unresponsive. He'd wet himself, wasn't covered over, and then I had to sit with him for 5 days and wait for him to pass away.
A coroner's report later laid bare a damning timeline. After 4 999 calls starting from 6 p.m, an ambulance finally arrived at Robert's home at midnight. Paramedics found he had red flag symptoms for sepsis but failed to pre-alert the hospital. Upon arrival, critical information was missed in the handover. Nursing observations were then not acted on within the hospital, something the coroner said should have prompted early treatment which would have prevented his death. Robert was instead directed to the waiting area at 1:16 a.m. and, having failed to respond when his name was called, was incorrectly recorded at 4:39 a.m. as having left without treatment. He was eventually discovered unconscious in a chair at 4:35 p.m. the next day. We've got hold of an internal report from University Hospitals Birmingham that describes the escalating pressure that evening, and it paints a bleak picture with no nurses available to monitor the waiting area where Robert was sat. West Midlands Ambulance Service, meanwhile, was experiencing delays in handing patients over of up to 13.5 hours, causing a backlog that at one point left 650 people waiting to be picked up.
There were failures at every stage.
The Fray family's lawyers are bringing a civil negligence case against West Midlands Ambulance Service and University Hospitals Birmingham NHS Foundation Trust, saying their poor care caused rather than contributed to Robert's death.
The hospital trust and the ambulance service say there were failings, but that ultimately his death couldn't have been prevented. What do you say to that?
Our evidence would suggest that earlier treatment, earlier administration of antibiotics to address the underlying infection that was causing Mr. Fray's condition would have made a difference, would have prevented that stroke from occurring, and would have allowed him to continue living his life and supporting his family.
This is the most shocking case that you've done.
It's certainly shocking. It's incredibly traumatic for the family to have experienced this, but very sadly, it is not unusual in my experience.
In fact, 4 years on, A&E waits across England are still double pre-COVID levels, with nearly 40% of patients still not being seen within 4 hours. West Midlands Ambulance Service told us too many patients have waited much longer for a response than they would have wanted as a result of extensive hospital handover delays, adding that while they had seen improvements, the West Midlands continues to have the worst handover delays in the country. University Hospitals Birmingham, meanwhile, said they are sorry for the circumstances that led to Robert's death and remain committed to learning from this incident to reduce the risk of such events happening again.
He was my best friend. First person I spoke to in the morning, last person I spoke to at night. If I had a problem, it wasn't my mum I went to, it was my dad, my eldest, she's 6. She remembers him. She also knows she'll go to bed at night, look out the window for the brightest star and say good night to him.
Claire is still haunted by the memory of that night, of the many holes her father slipped through, of what might have happened differently, of whether it could happen to somebody else.